In the early 1900s, professional cartoonists were left unsupported by federal labor laws and often taken advantage of by major production studios. In 1941, animators working for Walt Disney revolted against a toxic working environment, striking to demand workplace equality after being denied unionization. Despite some reforms to company labor practices, Disney turned to capitalize on anti-worker sentiments during the Second World War to save his studio. Although many animation unions faced harsh reformations to labor laws and other challenges to their influence in this era, they persevered and continued to fight in order to protect the rights of their workers. The use of animation had grown exponentially by the 1920s. Originally, the animators doing this work were under the minimal protection of the International Alliance of Theatrical Stage Employees, a union that was mainly for protecting actors. Unionization attempts began in 1925 as cartoonists aimed to gain their own standards specialized for the animation industry. The first successful unions were created by animators based in New York, which was widely known for being more tolerant of unions. Together, they formed the Commercial Artists and Designers Union, and later formed the Animated Motion Picture Workers Union. These became the most approached unions across the country when animators faced mistreatment in the workplace. An animation studio in New York, the Van Buren Studio, had animators attempting to unionize within it. These members were reported, resulting in them being fired. Only a few years later, animator Sadie Bowden was fired for her pro union sentiment, leading to her protest outside the studio. The Animated Motion Picture Workers Union tried to go after the studio legally for these cuts but lost. As backlash, artists were blacklisted by the studio from working in New York. At this point in time, animators had general union rights and working regulations were left up to the states. They had no national law to protect the unions or their members. Fleischer Studios ended up taking in many of the animators from the Van Buren studio. The company had a reputation for poor wages, but the other benefits attracted artists to work for them. Mistreatment quickly caught on with executives reflecting patterns of other studios, such as poor working conditions. Animator Dan Glass passed away in 1934 due to tuberculosis. The studio was blamed since Glass was a lower level animator and couldn't afford to recover since the studio didn't offer paid time off. With sad and angry and horrified reactions, the Fleischer Studios strike sparked in 1937. The strike ended in the same year, but it was made clear that something needed to change to protect animation workers. The Screen Cartoonists formed, creating their constitution in 1937. They were officially recognized by the Labor Relations Board in 1938 and began striking deals with animation studios across the nation, including Warner Brothers, to reform the working environment for animators. The same year, Disney Animation Studios released its most ambitious production yet on December 21st, 1937. The first feature-length animated film, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, had a creation process and release that revolutionized animation, as it had only been used for short-form videos before. CEO Walt Disney and his brother and co-founder Roy Disney knew the strain this production put onto their workers, as it needed over 700 artists and around 2 million hand-painted frames. They promised that within the film's success, artists would receive a bonus compensation after its release. These promises fell short when the brothers used the profits to open the Burbank studio to further expand the company. Within the new studio, there was the Penthouse Club for top-earning animators, where they'd receive luxury benefits that animators on the shop floor couldn't access. Walt Disney also made unfair decisions on behalf of his employees, not allowing them to unionize outside the company and refusing to make a deal with the Screen Cartoonists Guild. This allowed for unstable and inconsistent pay between workers and the creation of a caste system within the company. Tensions among workers in the studio began to rise as word of the mistreatment had spread. Walt Disney had noticed the new dynamic and reacted by holding an assembly on February of 1941 to address the issue. Every one of his workers at the Burbank studio was in attendance. Disney said, "I have felt and always will feel that the men who contribute the most to the organization should, out of respect alone, enjoy some privileges." He had passed the blame, saying that the pay inequality was justified based on work ethic and contribution. He ended the assembly by stating, "My first recommendation to you is this: put your own house in order. You can't accomplish anything by sitting around and waiting to be told everything. If you're not progressing as you should, instead of grumbling or growling, do something about it." Senior animator and studio leader Art Babbitt had felt sympathetic towards his coworkers and, with two leading labor officials, confronted Disney directly in a demand for equal treatment among all animators. Disney would have none of it, and on May 28, 1941, he had fired Babbitt and 16 other employees who had reportedly joined the Screen Cartoonists Guild. The next morning, he would drive to the studio to find a picket of over 200 animators revolting against the studio. The strike was maintained 24 hours a day outside the front of the studio. Signs held by protesters read, "Disney unfair," and "I'd rather be a dog than a scab."
So here we're out on strike now, see? And of course, we behave like lunatics. We're a young kid, don't forget. We're not having such a good time because we're so vocal and outside there, walking back and forth and yelling at them.
They received support from fellow animators such as Warner Brothers, who joined the protests with signs of their own in solidarity. Outside of fellow animators, the strikers also received support from groups such as Technicolor, a company that played a big role in Disney film production. They refused to process any Disney films during the strike. Walt Disney felt personally attacked by the strike, reacting by publicly arguing and getting into physical altercations with his former employees, most notably Babbitt.
Then Walt, going in and out, started snarling at us for some reason. and insulting Art Babbitt, our leader, who'd be out there, on a mic, exhorting us to more action.
Disney Studios began to struggle financially between the cost of production of previously released films and the strike itself. The company itself was being pushed to the brink of bankruptcy. The National Board of Labor Relations intervened, demanding a resolution. Co founder Roy Disney went to Washington, D.C. to settle the strike. He signed an agreement and met almost every demand from the strikers while Walt Disney was in South America for a business
And
endeavor.
so, Walt took that really, he took it to heart. So I knew we had hurt his feelings. How dare we go out on strike again? His brother, though, Roy Disney's a different kind of a man. And so I don't know how he did it, but somehow he got Walt out of the country. Like, he encouraged Walt to go down to South America and do Saludos Amigos and do, a lot of research. While he was gone, Roy settled the strike. He says, guys, come back and forget all this nonsense. And so we did. Well, Walt was gone, see.
Walt later reluctantly signed a contract with the Screen Cartoonists Guild in 1942 to reform his studio. Disney Animation Studios needed to adjust in order to come back financially. With the strike over, the company continued production. The relationship of employers and employees was damaged. Over half the artists in the studio ended up leaving and joining other animation studios. After the strike, many animation executives across the nation saw tensions rising from World War II, leading them creating defense-related products up to 2 years before the Pearl Harbor attack on December 7, 1941. Called in by the Capitol, Disney was ordered to allow the reformation of the lot in the Burbank studio as a temporary military base. With this, Disney signed a naval contract of $90,000, agreeing to make 20 training videos for the war effort. This led to the studio becoming politically active, painting aircrafts, decorating war bond certificates for children, and making anti-Nazi propaganda. Disney was at first reluctant to use this method to revive the studio, saying, "I don't like this profit during war, when people are out there losing their lives." He also was concerned about the public reaction and the reputation of the company. Despite this, approximately 90% of Disney productions were related to the war by 1943. Shortly following the war, President Harry S. Truman signed an executive order allowing the House Un-American Activities Committee the power to investigate those suspected of communistic ideals in 1947. The same year, the Taft-Hartley Act was passed as a reformation to the National Labor Relations Act, restricting unionization and prohibiting secondary boycotts and jurisdictional strikes for all labor unions. These charges targeted many big labor unions, including a focus on the film industry going into the 1950s. Many influential figures were called to testify before the HUAC, including Julie Garland and Frank Sinatra, who all refused under their Fifth Amendment rights. Walt Disney willingly testified before them and stated his former employees, whom had all fought for unionization and labor rights, were communists and that the Screen Cartoonists Guild was working for China.
Well, the result was that he struck. I believed at that time that Mr. Sorrell was a communist because of all the things that I had heard and had seen his name appearing on many of the communist.
Unionization in the entertainment industry was twisted into something negative rather than a positive protective barrier for workers. Unions still stood strong through these trials, continuing to demand reforms to support animators. The Screen Cartoonists Guild suffered briefly from Disney's accusations, eventually being broken down from workers voting to move to be part of the IASTE in 1952. However, they kept unionship alive by continuing as an independent organization until they merged with AFTRA in 1971 and passed the mantle to the new unions, the Motion Picture Screen Cartoonists. The union grew rapidly and carried similar virtues to the SCG. The momentum picked up most with the emergence of runaway production. The practice was a cheaper method for studios production, as they would outsource labor to other states or countries instead of hiring local Los Angeles animators. After back and forth that began in 1979, the MPSC reacted by leading a strike in 1982, consisting of over 1,000 animators and multiple companies in California. This strike, also referred to as the Runaway Wars, had hit the industry hard. Due to the number of animators on strike, production of shows stopped completely for multiple studios, forcing them to air reruns. Any new animated segments were produced before the strike had begun. The protests went on for 10 weeks, finally ending when reformations and laws, such as the Runaway Clause, came to prevent studios from immediately going to foreign employment. Today, the union is known as the Animation Guild, and they continue fighting for animators' rights while using previous challenges, pickets, and victories as momentum. The future of animators is unknown, as questions are raised regarding the dangers of corporate consolidation and technological development, but the union remains strong as they push for reformations to better the workplace. In the early 1900s, professional cartoonists were left unsupported by federal labor laws and often taken advantage of by major production studios. In 1941, animators working for Walt Disney revolted against a toxic working environment, striking to demand workplace equality after being denied unionization. Despite some reforms to company labor practices, Disney turned to capitalize on anti-worker sentiments during the Second World War to save his studio. Although many animation unions faced harsh reformations to labor laws and other challenges to their influence in this era, they persevered and continued to fight in order to protect the rights of their workers.